pre-famous Steve Chou, back before you were a big deal and before everybody in the finance world and entrepreneurship world knew who you were, before you had a top 25 marketing podcast in the world. I'm making up all this right now. That's right, right?
You did, because Stetson pulled all that.
That is true. He pulled all that, but I'm not looking at it. I want you to know how good I can memorize things.
Nice.
Before all of that, take us to pre-that Steve Chou. Who were you before you were a big deal?
Pre that, I was an electrical engineer.
Were you really?
That's what I studied.
How did I not know that?
Well, okay. You know I'm Asian, right? So we basically have three paths in life.
Okay.
Lawyer, engineer, or doctor. I chose engineer. I had no intention of doing any of that stuff.
Okay.
I went to school. I knew I was going to be an engineer early on. Went to Stanford, graduated, got my master's, found a job in the Silicon Valley. I loved my job. I was set to design microprocessors for the rest of my life.
Ooh.
Yeah. But then I married a beautiful woman. Her name is Jennifer. You guys have met, I think, right?
Yeah.
You guys met at FinCon.
She's beautiful.
So, hey, easy there, buddy. Heather's not bad herself. Yeah. We live in the Silicon Valley, which is probably the most expensive place.
Yeah, crazy.
Maybe outside of New York. And she told me she wanted to quit her job. She was making 6 figures, and you know, Asians, we want education, right? So in order to get a good house in a good school district, you pretty much need 2 incomes where I live.
Yeah.
And when she told me she was going to quit, I was on board with it, because when I grew up, my parents, they were first-generation immigrants. And they came here with nothing. And so they worked their butts off, so I didn't have to pay for anything. I didn't pay for college. I ended up debt-free coming out of college, right? And so I was on board with that, but I was worried at the same time, right? Because we wouldn't be able to get a house and all that stuff. So we ended up selling handkerchiefs.
Like blowing your nose handkerchiefs?
Like blowing your nose handkerchiefs. Okay. And I'll tell you how we got started with that. It was completely random. And it's funny how just random things happen.
Yeah.
You know? When my wife and we were getting married, we hired these photographers, kind of like your team here, but maybe more expensive. I don't know. It was a lot of money at the time.
These guys are cheap.
Yeah, just throw them like burritos, right? No,
exactly. Here's some Mexican food for lunch. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
It's your pay for the month.
So my wife, she cries a lot, not because of me.
No, sure.
Right? I mean, not because she's sad, because she's happy. So on our wedding day, she knew she was going to cry. And she didn't want the photos of her crying, drying her tears with Kleenex tissues, right? So we looked all over the place for a handkerchief. And at that time, which was 2003-ish, couldn't find handkerchiefs anywhere, right? We looked all over the place. And then the only place we could find hankies was this factory in China. But the minimum order was like a couple hundred. So we ended up getting a couple hundred, and it was like dirt cheap, like dirt cheap. Like we were even wondering if they were like poisonous or something.
Just laced with like anthrax or something.
Right.
Yeah.
We used maybe like
paint.
6 of them for the bridal party. We also got some for the men's, and then we sold the rest on eBay, and they ended up selling like hotcakes. So then fast forward we waited like 3 years before having kids. She became pregnant. She told me she was going to quit. And then we brainstormed all these different ways to make money that she could just stay at home, right? Then we remembered, we went through a bunch of different ideas. I don't know if you're interested in hearing those.
I do.
We wanted to start a Kumons. Have you heard of Kumons?
No.
It's like a place where Asian kids go to like prep for school and stuff.
Okay.
Right? That would be right up my alley. Dream Dinners, which is like a food prep service.
Okay.
But all these, like the minimum investment for all these ideas was like $500K or so. We didn't want to spend that much. Then we remembered the hankies. So we got back in touch with that same vendor who just happened to still be in business three years later. And then we decided to just start a handkerchief store. And it was tough because my buddies are lawyers, doctors, and engineers. And they'd be like, hey, Steve, how's that hanky store doing?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're trying to be supportive, but you could tell there's like some underlying stuff going on in there. To make things worse, I belong to this program at school. It's called the Mayfield Fellows Program, and it's a VC that basically funds 12 students a year to learn how to start a company that's funded, that's going to be the next like unicorn or billion-dollar company. And then every year, so it's been like, I've been out of school, 25 years now? So 12 kids a year times 25, we all go on this retreat every single year. And we go around and we share what we're up to. And everyone's, so Kevin Systrom of Instagram is in that group, right?
Oh, that's cool.
So he'll be, oh yeah, I had $1 billion exit, or someone else will have a $400 million exit. always comes to me. I'm like, still selling hankies, guys. Still
Yeah.
selling hankies. So
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
And what's it called? Bumblebee?
Bumblebee Linens is our store.
Okay.
And that led to a blog called My Wife Quit Her Job. That was my retirement plan. So, okay, so the store made $100K in profit in our first year.
Whoa.
Couldn't believe it,
Yeah.
right? And so my wife quit, and then I was like, I want to quit too, right? And at that time, have you heard of Steve Pavlina?
Name sounds familiar,
No.
but
Okay, he's this personal development blogger. I don't know what he's doing now.
Yeah.
But I was reading his blog religiously. He had this one article that was entitled, How to Make Your First Love Dollar. And it's basically, the premise basically is, how do you do something that you actually want to be doing to make money? And at the time, he was making $4,000 a day on AdSense. This is kind of like the height of blogging.
yeah.
And so I was like, okay, there's nothing special about this guy. I can do it too with mywifequitherjob.com.
Yep.
And so that's how I started that blog. Ironically, my buddies, like as soon as Bumblebee Linen selling hankies started making money, my buddies were like, hey, I want to start a store.
Yeah.
I want to retire. So I was tired of answering their questions, and I just documented all that stuff on the blog, right? But none of those guys ever read anything.
Yeah, of course not.
None of them, nothing. Instead, I attracted these random people who wanted to start e-commerce stores, and kind of like the rest is history. It led to a podcast, which you already mentioned. It led to an e-commerce conference. It led to a training class. It led to a YouTube channel. I'm on TikTok.
Ooh, are you dancing?
I took all these dance lessons just for that, and then I realized you don't need to dance.
You can just talk.
Yeah, you can just talk.
Yeah, you do actually well on TikTok. I've seen you on TikTok.
Well,
You popped
I
up.
actually, we can talk about this later, but social media, I think, is probably one of the worst things. I try not to use it as much because
Yeah.
I got teenage kids now,
Yeah.
and I don't want them on it because I think it's like the worst thing for self-esteem for adults
Oh,
and
100%.
kids. Yeah.